sister's voice sliced through the country club ballroom like a butter knife through silk, and somehow that made it worse. "Everyone, meet my little sister Delphine. She digs holes for a living. No husband, no kids, no real career, just a girl who plays in the mud." 300 people in cocktail attire turned to stare at me. A waiter froze with a tray of champagne flutes halfway to a table. Someone behind me actually said, "Oh, honey," the way you say it at a funeral. And there I stood in the silk wrap dress I'd ironed twice that morning, feeling my whole face go hot, watching my sister Margot raise her glass with that pageant smile she'd perfected in middle school. My own sister. At her engagement party, in front of every person who mattered to her. And the worst part? My father laughed. Not a big laugh, just a soft, fond chuckle like Margot had said something charming about a misbehaving puppy. Like he agreed but was too polished to say so himself. My mother had passed away 4 years ago. My father was all I had left of the people who were supposed to love me without conditions. And he laughed. Let me back up. My name is Delphine Hargrove. I'm 31 years old, and according to the people who share my last name, I'm the family disappointment who never grew up. I never went to law school like Margot. I never married a hedge fund guy like Margot. I never moved to a brownstone in Boston's Back Bay like Margot. Here's what they don't know. I own Hargrove Earthworks, a high-end residential excavation and land design company headquartered in Burlington, Vermont, with crews in 3 states, 62 employees. Last fiscal year, we cleared $14.3 million in revenue. 2 months ago, we signed a contract with a private development group to do all the site preparation and grading for a $90 million luxury resort going up in the Berkshires. My company has been featured in Forbes once, Inc. magazine twice, and in New York Times Sunday Business Profile last spring. The journalist called me the woman who turned dirt into a fortune. I never told my family any of this. Not the money, not the magazine covers, not the fact that the truck I drive, a beat-up Navy Ford F-250 with 180,000 miles on it, is paid off, and so is the company. I had this stupid, stubborn idea that they would eventually love me the way I am. That maybe one Thanksgiving, my father would look at me across the cranberry sauce and say, "I'm proud of you, kiddo," and mean it, without first needing a Forbes article to translate me into a language he respected. Spoiler, he didn't. Margot is 28, 3 years younger than me, 3 lifetimes more polished. She works as a corporate attorney at one of those firms that has its name carved into the marble of its lobby like a tombstone. Mom used to call her our Margot, the way you talk about a beloved cat. After Mom died, Dad just took over the title. Our Margot? Margot's promotions. Margot's new car. Margot's loft. Margot's loft. Margot loft. Margot. Margot. And me? Delphine is still doing her little landscaping thing up in Vermont. You know Delphine. It's not landscaping, Dad. I'm a civil engineer. I design and execute large-scale earthworks projects. I have a master's from Cornell. That's nice, sweetheart. Are you seeing anyone? I gave up explaining around the time I turned 26. Some doors just stay closed. Or so I thought. Margot called me 5 weeks before the engagement party. She wanted me there, which should have been my first red flag. Margot never wants me anywhere. I'm the embarrassing older sister she keeps in a drawer. But her exact words on the phone were, and I quote, "Listen, Delph, this is a really important night for me. Spencer's family is going to be there. His dad is on the board of 3 things you've never heard of. So can you, dress nice? And maybe don't go into a whole thing about your gravel pit or whatever?" My gravel pit or whatever. I should have said no. I should have said a lot of things. But here's my fatal flaw. I love my sister. Somewhere under all that lacquered pageant smile is the girl who used to sneak into my bed during thunderstorms. The teenager who slipped me $20 the time I lost my babysitting money. I kept thinking the real Margot was in there somewhere, waiting for the right moment to come back out. So I said yes, because I am, apparently, a slow learner. I drove down to Greenwich, Connecticut on a Friday afternoon in early October, the leaves just starting to turn. The venue was a country club called Sycamore Hollow, the kind of place where the valet looks at your truck like you've personally insulted his grandmother. I put on the silk dress, the heels I only wear to industry awards, the little gold earrings my mother left me. I'd had my hair cut the week before. I'd practiced small talk in the truck mirror like a teenager getting ready for prom. Walking through those lobby doors, I actually felt hopeful. Maybe this would be the night Margot introduced me proudly. Maybe I'd shake hands with Spencer's father and have a real conversation about something other than whether I'd found someone. Maybe Dad would look at me, in this dress, in this room, and just for a second, see me. Then I rounded the corner into the ballroom, and I almost laughed. The Sycamore Hollow had completely renovated its grounds 2 years ago. New retaining walls along the 18th fairway, a reflecting pool at the entrance, a tiered drainage system that solved the flooding problem the property had had since 1987. The bid had been a nightmare. The client had been a nightmare. The chairman of the membership committee had cried, actually cried. When we finished it under budget, there was a small brass plaque near the reflecting pool that read, "Site work by Hargrove Earthworks." My sister had chosen the venue specifically because Spencer's parents were members. She had no idea her stinky sister had built half of what she was walking on. I grabbed a glass of Prosecco and tried to find a corner. That's when my father saw me. He gave me a half wave from across the room, the kind you give a coworker you didn't really want to talk to. Then he turned back to whatever conversation he was having with Spencer's mother. I felt that wave in my chest like a small, polite punch. I was halfway to the patio doors when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Delphine. Wow! I turned around and there he was, Brody, the man I'd been engaged to for 18 months in my mid-20s, who left me 3 weeks before our wedding because I was too obsessed with my little dirt business to be a good partner. The man who told me, on the worst night of my life, that I needed to find a job that didn't require steel-toed boots if I wanted to be taken seriously by anyone. He put on about 20 pounds. He'd lost most of his hair. He was holding the hand of a blonde woman who looked exactly like a younger, sharper version of his mother. Brody, I didn't know you'd be here. Yeah, my buddy Spencer and I went to shout together. Crazy, right? Small world. He smiled, and his teeth had been whitened to the color of printer paper. You look great. You look the same. You don't, I said, and I sipped my drink, and I did not elaborate. The blonde woman looked at me like I was a stain. Of course Brody was here. Of course he was, because this night wasn't already enough of a fever dream. Before I could excuse myself to walk into the reflecting pool I had personally graded, Margot clinked her glass for attention. The room went quiet. She floated up onto the little riser by the band with Spencer at her elbow, beaming, and then she said the thing that I will hear in my sleep for the rest of my life. Everyone, before we get to the toasts, I just want to take a second and thank my family, my amazing fiancé, my incredible dad, and she scanned the crowd, found me, gave me that pageant smile. My little sister Delphine, she drove down all the way from Vermont. She digs holes for a living. No husband, no kids, no real career. But she cleans up nice when you put her in a dress. The laughter that followed was that polite, country club laughter. The kind that doesn't fully commit, but is loud enough that everybody who matters knows what side they're supposed to be on. Just kidding, Delph. Love you. And my father laughed, that soft, fond chuckle. I watched him do it. I stood there with my warm Prosecco, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, since the night my mother died. Actually, that strange, calm cold that happens when a door inside you closes for good. I smiled. I raised my glass. I let the laughter wash over me, because here is what 25 years of being underestimated teaches you. You learn to listen. You learn to wait. And you start noticing the things other people don't, like the way my father was holding his drink with his left hand, because his right hand had started shaking last Christmas, and he hadn't told me. Like the way Spencer's mother kept watching Margot's fiancé with an expression that wasn't pride, it was worry. Like the way Margot herself, beneath the rehearsed glow, was checking her phone every 90 seconds and laughing one beat too loud. And like the older woman in the dove gray suit standing near the bar, who was the only person in the entire room not pretending to laugh at me. She was watching Margot the way an auditor watches a tax return. Our eyes met. She raised her glass to me, just slightly. I had no idea who she was. I was about to find out. I walked out onto the terrace. My terrace. The flagstone I had laid, the retaining wall I had designed, the river birch I had argued the landscape architect into planting. The fall air smelled like wood smoke and old grass. I breathed it in and tried to figure out how I was going to get through the next 4 hours without crying in front of my ex-fiancé. You designed all this, didn't you? I turned. The woman in the gray suit was standing in the doorway. She was maybe 65, with short silver hair and the kind of posture you only see in retired military and very, very rich people. How could you tell? The grade. Most people don't notice grade. You can see the whole property drain to that bioswale on the left, and a swale doesn't read as a swale, it reads as a garden bed. That's expensive thinking. She walked out next to me and offered her hand. Phoebe Lindquist. I sat on the membership committee that hired your firm 2 summers ago. I voted yes. I shook her hand. Delphine Hargrove. I know, she said. I read the Times piece in March. I almost wrote you a letter. I'm a retired forensic accountant. Spent 40 years at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division before I went private. We don't usually get excited about women in earthworks. I got excited. I laughed, surprised. Thank you. She turned to face me, and the warmth came down a couple of degrees. Delphine, I'm going to say something, and I want you to take it in the spirit it's intended. I'm here tonight because my godson is one of Spencer Holling's college friends. I am not here because I like the Hollings family. I think Spencer is a perfectly nice young man who has no idea what he's about to marry into. And I think your sister has been the subject of a state bar inquiry for about 4 months. The terrace tilted slightly. A what? It's not public yet. It will be. I still have friends in places. There are allegations she has been moving client trust funds, real estate closings mostly. Big numbers. Small amounts at a time so the firm's internal audit doesn't catch it. She'd been a star associate, but the partners aren't stupid. They've been quietly building a file. That's not possible. Margot is the golden child. I know. Phoebe's eyes were kind, but they were not soft. The reason I'm telling you this, Delphine, is because your father is here. I watched him come in. He didn't drive himself, did he? No. He came with Margot. He looks frail. I looked through the glass at my dad. He was sitting at one of the round tables now, and Margot was leaning over him, and she had her hand on his wrist in a way that was, I don't even know how to describe it, proprietary. Like a cat with a piece of toast it doesn't want anybody else to touch. He's been sick, I said slowly. Some kind of tremor. He says it's nothing. Phoebe took a sip of her drink. Is your sister handling his finances? The terrace tilted again. I gripped the railing of my own wall. He gave her power of attorney last spring, I said. She told me it was just for paperwork. He didn't want to deal with it after Mom's estate stuff. Phoebe nodded once slowly. Delphine, I'd like to give you my card. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you that when people who are scared start running out of options, they reach for the wallets of the people closest to them. And I am telling you this because if I'm wrong, you've lost nothing. And if I'm right, the only person who can protect your father quietly without spooking your sister is you. She slipped a small ivory card into my hand. Don't go to the police yet. Don't go to your father. Get evidence first. Call me when you're ready. She walked back inside. I stood on my own flagstone, in my own dress, and I felt the cold close around me like a coat. I drove back to Vermont that night instead of staying at the hotel. I drove the whole 5 hours with the radio off. I made it home at 4 a.m, and I sat in my kitchen with my cat in my lap, and I didn't cry. I just made a list. The next morning I called my father casually. I asked how he was feeling. I asked about the tremor. I asked, very gently, who was helping him with his bills. And he said in that thin, agreeable voice he developed in the last year, "Oh, Margot handles all of that now. She set up a joint thing. So she can pay everything from her phone. Isn't that something?" A joint thing? I asked him if he knew how much was in his retirement account. He laughed and said, "Honey, I haven't looked in months. Margot says it's doing fine. The market's been wild, you know." I asked him about the house. The little Cape Cod in Mystic he and my mother had bought in 1986 and paid off in 2009. He paused. He said, Why are you asking about the house? Just curious, Dad. Margot took out one of those, what do you call it, a line of credit, for some upgrades. New roof, new furnace. She's been very thoughtful about all that. A line of credit on a house that he had paid off when I was 9 years old. I hung up and I sat at my kitchen table, and I felt my hands go numb. Then I called Phoebe Lindquist. What followed was the most disciplined 3 months of my life, and I once managed 21 job sites simultaneously through a labor strike, so I know what disciplined looks like. I hired a private investigator named Linda McHugh out of Hartford who specialized in elder financial exploitation. I hired a Connecticut estate attorney who didn't know my family. I had Linda pull the property records on the Mystic House. There was a $310,000 home equity line of credit drawn against it, opened 13 months ago, with my father's signature on documents he could not have understood. I had her pull bank records through a legal subpoena process my new attorney walked me through carefully. Over 18 months, $487,000 had moved out of my father's retirement accounts into a money market account in Margot's name. There was also a cash value life insurance policy, the one my mother had taken out on him decades ago, that had been surrendered for $112,000 in April. The check had been cashed by Margot using her power of attorney. He had no idea. $600,000. From my dad. From the man who had taught me how to read a tape measure when I was 4. The man who had laughed at me at a party 3 nights ago because his other daughter, who was robbing him blind, had told him to. I sat in my office above the equipment yard, and I looked out at the row of yellow excavators, and for one long minute, I let myself just be furious. Then I picked up the phone. I called Phoebe. She put me in touch with an old colleague of hers at the Connecticut Attorney General's office, a man named Darius Coleman in the Elder Protection Unit. I sent him Linda's findings. I sent him my attorney's preliminary memo. I sent him copies of the HELOC documents and the surrendered policy and the bank trail. Darius called me back 2 days later. His voice was very calm. Ms. Hargrove, the state has been wanting to make a coordinated example case for about a year now. Elder financial abuse by a family member with power of attorney is one of the fastest growing categories of crime in this state, and prosecutors are hungry for a case the public will actually pay attention to. I'm going to be honest with you. Your sister, given her bar status in the firm she works for, is exactly that case. But I need you to do this carefully. If she gets spooked, she can move money offshore in an afternoon. We have one shot. Tell me what you need. A controlled environment. A place we know she'll be. Witnesses. Ideally her in the same room as your father, where we can serve documents and execute the warrant cleanly. I sat with my coffee getting cold and I thought about it. And then I smiled, because I am, when I want to be, a vindictive woman. There's a rehearsal dinner, I said. 3 weeks, the Sunday before the wedding, at a restaurant called The Briar in Greenwich. I designed their courtyard. How many people? 40 maybe. Family. Wedding party. Spencer's parents. Some of the partners from her firm. There was a pause. Ms. Hargrove, that is a very public place. I know. You understand we'd be arresting your sister in front of her future in-laws. I understand. He paused again. I heard him breathe out. Tell me more. The next 3 weeks, I became the doting older sister my family had never had. I called Margot to ask about the wedding flowers. I sent her a thoughtful gift, a leather journal, monogrammed, to congratulate her on the engagement. I called my father twice a week to chat about his garden. I drove down to Mystic one Saturday and made him soup and watched him try to hide how badly his hands were shaking. I held it together. I held it together. I held it together. 2 days before the rehearsal dinner, Margot called me. Her voice was high and a little brittle. Delph, hi, listen, this is weird, but could I borrow some money? I sat down on my couch. How much? 80,000. I'll pay you back the second we get back from the honeymoon. It's just, Spencer's family wants us to put a down payment on this place in Wellesley before the wedding, and my retainer doesn't post until next quarter, and Dad's stuff is all tied up in long term right now. And I know you have your little business savings, and I would be so grateful. My little business savings. I let her sit in the silence for a full 10 seconds. I'll think about it, Margot. We can talk at the dinner. You're an angel. You're a literal angel. I love you so much. She hadn't told me she loved me in 8 years. I hung up and sat on my couch in the dark, and I felt nothing at all. I drove to Greenwich that Sunday in my truck. I wore a dark green dress my best friend had picked out for me, and the gold earrings and flat shoes, because I was not going to wobble through this evening for anyone. I parked my F-250 next to the Range Rovers and walked into the Briar. Margot was already there, glowing, drifting from table to table. Spencer was at the bar talking to his father. Spencer's mother saw me come in and gave me a look that was almost sympathetic, like she knew something was off and just couldn't place it. My father was already seated at the head table, and when he saw me, his face lit up in the old way, the pre-tremor way. He half stood and reached for me and pulled me into a hug that smelled like Old Spice and laundry detergent, and for 1 second I almost cried into his shoulder. "You look beautiful, kiddo," he said. "Thanks, Dad. You look like your mother." I had to step away for a second after that. I went to the bar. I ordered a club soda. Brody was not at this dinner, thank God. Phoebe Lindquist was, in the far corner, in a charcoal pantsuit, having a calm conversation with one of the wedding party. She did not look at me. I did not look at her. The dinner began. Margot stood up to give a toast. I had told Darius Coleman that the toast would start at 7:45 and the team would have a window between toasts and dessert. I checked my watch. 7:43. "I just want to say," Margot began, raising a glass of champagne, "that I am the luckiest woman in this room. Spencer, you complete me. Spencer's mom and dad, you've welcomed me like a daughter. Dad, you are my hero." She paused for the awe. "And my sister, Delphine, who has been so unbelievably supportive these last few weeks. You know, growing up, I always thought of Delphine as the wild one, the free spirit, the one who marched to her own drum. And now look at us, me, the corporate stiff, and her, building her little business in the woods. I love you, Delph. I really do." The room awed on cue. I stood up. Margot's smile flickered, just for a beat. She wasn't expecting me to respond. I almost never spoke at family things. I cleared my throat and raised my glass of club soda, and I gave her a sweet smile. "Thank you, Margot. That was so generous." I turned to face the room. "I'd actually like to say a few things, if that's all right. As the older sister, I won't be long. I promise." The room settled in, mildly curious. Spencer's mother put down her fork. "My sister and I are very different people. She's right about that. She went to law school. I went to engineering school. She works in a tower in Boston. I work outside, mostly in the mud, and I love it. There has always been a running joke in my family that I dig holes for a living. Margot reminded everyone of it 3 weeks ago at the engagement party. A few of the guests shifted in their seats. Some of them had been there. And it's funny because, it's true. I do dig holes. I happen to dig them for a living that funds 62 families and grossed $14 million last year. The company is called Hargrove Earthworks. We did the renovation work on the Sycamore Hollow grounds 2 summers ago. I imagine some of you have golfed on it." The room got very quiet. Margot's face was frozen in a half smile. "I don't say this to brag. I say this because I have learned in the last 3 months that when you let people think you're nothing, sometimes they will treat the people you love like nothing too." I turned to my father. "Dad, I love you. And I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner." He looked at me, confused, his glass halfway to his mouth. "What's happening, kiddo? Hang on." I turned back to the room. The double doors at the far end of the dining room opened. 2 people in dark suits stepped through, a man and a woman, very calm, very ordinary looking. Darius Coleman in person, with a colleague. Behind them, 2 uniformed Greenwich PD officers. Margot saw them, and the champagne flute in her hand started to tremble. "Delphine," she said in a voice that wasn't her voice anymore. "Delphine, what did you do?" "Nothing, Margot. You did this." "I just made sure other people found out." Darius crossed the room with that easy, professional walk that those guys all have. He stopped beside Margot's chair. "Margot Hargrove, my name is Darius Coleman. I'm with the Connecticut Attorney General's office. I need to ask you to step outside with me. We have a warrant in connection with the financial accounts of Roland Hargrove, your father." Margot's mouth opened. No sound came out. Spencer stood up. "I'm sorry. what is happening right now. The second agent stepped forward and spoke very calmly to him. Sir, we'd ask that you stay seated. This is not about you. We will be releasing more information in the morning. Spencer's mother put both her hands on the table like she was bracing herself on a boat. Margot looked at me. Really looked at me. For what might have been the first time in her adult life. You're insane, she whispered. You're jealous. You've always been jealous. You're going to ruin my wedding because nobody ever wanted you, Margot. That was my father. His voice was thin, but it was clear. We all turned. He was sitting up very straight in his chair, and his eyes were focused in a way they hadn't been in months. Margot, did you take Mom's life insurance? The room went absolutely still. She didn't answer. Margot, look at me. Did you take Mom's life insurance? A single tear ran down her cheek, and she said very quietly, Daddy, I was going to put it back. He nodded slowly twice, the way old men nod when something terrible is finally clicking into place. Then he turned his face away from her, toward me, and he held out his hand. I went to him. I took it. His hand was cold and the tremor was bad. I held it anyway. Darius and his colleague led Margot out of the room. She wasn't in cuffs. They hadn't done that part. She would be processed at the station. Spencer's father stood frozen by the bar. Spencer's mother got up and quietly left through the kitchen, presumably to call her own attorney. Phoebe Lindquist finished her wine and nodded at me once. Very small, very approving. Spencer himself was crying at the head table. He looked about 12 years old. I felt sorry for him. Genuinely, he'd been a prop in something he had no idea was happening. My father squeezed my hand. Delphine. Yes, Dad. How long have you known? About 3 months. And the company? What did you say? $14 million? Yes, Dad. He started to cry very quietly, the way men of his generation cry, with his mouth closed and his eyes squeezed shut. Why didn't you tell me? I knelt down next to his chair so we were eye to eye. The other guests were quietly leaving. The restaurant staff were pretending very hard not to look at us. Because I wanted you to be proud of me without it, Dad, just once. He shook his head and the tears spilled over, and he said, I always was. I'm an idiot. I'm so sorry, kiddo. I'm such an idiot. I put my forehead against his. I didn't cry. I couldn't somehow. I just sat there with my father and let him hold my hand for a long time. 6 weeks later, I was standing in the kitchen of the Mystic House, my dad's house, now permanently in a protective trust I'd set up, making him oatmeal. He was at the table doing the crossword in pencil. His tremor was the same. That wasn't going to get better. But his eyes were clear, and he was eating, and he laughed at the puzzle when it tricked him. Margot took a plea deal. She lost her law license, which was, in the end, the only thing she had ever really loved. She is going to do 30 months in a minimum security facility in Connecticut, with restitution that she will be paying for the rest of her working life. She and Spencer never married, obviously. He sent me a handwritten letter which I thought was decent of him. I didn't write back, but I didn't throw it away either. I covered the HELOC on the Mystic House myself, in cash, the week after the rehearsal dinner. I set up a care fund for my father, with a fiduciary I trust, that will outlive both of us. I hired a part-time aide named Carmen, who comes 3 days a week and makes my father laugh more than anyone has in a long time. Phoebe Lindquist and I have lunch the first Tuesday of every month. She has, somehow, become the closest thing I have to a mentor. She introduced me to a venture group in Boston that is now backing my expansion into the Mid-Atlantic. She also told me, last month in her dry, careful way, Delphine, you have to stop hiding. You earned this. Walk into a room and let people see you. I'm working on it. Brody emailed me about a week after the news broke locally. The email was 3 paragraphs long and ended with, I always knew you were going to do great things. I deleted it. Some bridges you don't burn, you just don't cross them. This morning I drove out to a job site in northern New Hampshire. A new client, a vineyard expansion, 200 acres of complicated terraced grading. The sun was just coming up over the hills, and my foreman handed me a coffee, and we walked the site, and my boots got muddy, and I felt like myself in a way I'd forgotten was possible. My phone rang. It was my father. I picked up on the second ring. Morning, Dad. Morning, kiddo. Listen, I was thinking. When's the next one of those magazine things? The one with the pictures of the trucks? Inc. Magazine, Dad. That one. When's the next one? They're not doing another profile. That was a one-time thing. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, well, maybe call them. Tell them they should do another one. Tell them my daughter is something else. I stood on a muddy hilltop in New Hampshire and I smiled into my phone and I told him I'd think about it. And then I went back to work. I've thought about that night at the Briar more times than I can count, and what stays with me isn't the moment my sister was led out of that dining room. It's the moment my father looked at me and asked how long I'd known. Because that question contains everything I want to say about why things ended the way they did. Margot didn't fall because the state of Connecticut caught her. Margot fell the moment she decided that the people who loved her unconditionally were the easiest people to take from. That's the part nobody warns you about in a family. The closer somebody is to you, the more damage they can do if they choose to, because trust is just a door you've already unlocked. Margot walked through that door with my father's power of attorney, and she helped herself to a man's whole life. And she did it because somewhere along the way she stopped seeing him as a person and started seeing him as a balance sheet. That is the cause. The 30 months in a facility is just the effect catching up. What I learned, and what I wish I had learned 10 years sooner, is that staying quiet about who I really was didn't make my family love me more honestly. It just made it easier for them to underestimate me. And underestimation in a family is a kind of slow violence. I thought I was being humble. I thought I was protecting something pure between us. I wasn't. I was teaching them that my real life didn't matter, and people eventually will believe what you teach them. If I had been honest from the start, my father might still have his hands the way they used to be. I'll carry that for a long time. So if you take anything from what happened to my family, take this. Quiet dignity is a beautiful thing, but it is not the same as hiding. There is a version of yourself that you have worked for, suffered for, gotten dirt under your fingernails for, and that version deserves to walk into the rooms of your own life with the lights on. Let the people who love you actually see you. And the people who don't love you, the ones who laugh at your boots or your truck or the way you smell after a job site, those people will reveal themselves the second they realize they were wrong about you. Let them. The other thing I learned is that patience is not the same as passivity. The 3 months I spent gathering evidence, the careful phone calls, the lawyers, the boring forensic work, that was the most loving thing I have ever done for my father, even though it didn't feel like love at the time. It felt like cold steel. But love, when somebody you care about is being harmed, sometimes has to look like a spreadsheet and a subpoena. Be honest about who you are. Be patient enough to act with evidence instead of anger. And when the people who underestimated you finally look up and see you, don't shrink. Stand at your own height. That's all I've got. Thank you for sitting with me through this story.